The moment my brother walked into my company's all-hands meeting and sat down at the head of the conference table like he owned the place, I felt the entire room go still. He looked around at my team, 43 people I had hired, trained, and fought for, and said, loudly enough for everyone to hear, "We need to talk about the future of this company." I set down my coffee, looked at him and said, "Go ahead. Pull up the cap table." He didn't know what a cap table was. That was the whole problem. My name is Claire. I am 31 years old. I built a healthcare software company from a spare bedroom in a 2-bedroom apartment I shared with a roommate because I couldn't afford to live alone. The company is called Meridian Health Solutions. We help mid-sized hospitals manage patient intake, reduce billing errors, and cut administrative costs. Last year, we processed data for over 230 hospitals across 22 states. We have a contract with one of the 5 largest hospital networks in the country. My brother's name is Derek. He has held 7 jobs in the last 9 years. The longest he stayed at any of them was 11 months. He has a business degree from a school he transferred into after washing out of his first choice, and he has never once in the 9 years since graduation built anything. But in my family, Derek is the one with potential. I want to be precise about what I mean when I say that, because it sounds like the kind of thing people exaggerate when they're trying to gain sympathy. I am not exaggerating. My parents have used that exact word, potential, to describe my brother at every family dinner, every holiday, every phone call in which his name came up. When I launched Meridian, my mother's response was to ask whether I had considered finding a co-founder, someone with real business experience, to help me manage things. When I told her I had graduated top of my program at Georgia Tech and had already signed 2 paying clients before I left my previous job, she said that was wonderful. But that experience was different from instincts, and that Derek had always had remarkable instincts. Derek's instincts, at that point, had led him through a string of sales jobs, a failed attempt at flipping houses during a period when the market made flipping houses nearly impossible to get wrong, and a 3-month stretch where he told my parents he was consulting while he was actually just not working. I stopped expecting fairness from my parents around age 24. What I did not expect, what genuinely caught me off guard, was the day my father called me to say that the family was stepping back from our relationship. That is the phrase he used. Stepping back. He said my attitude had become a problem. He said I had grown cold and transactional, that I didn't make time for family, that my priorities were wrong. He said my mother was hurt by things I had said. I asked him what things specifically, and he brought up a dinner 8 months earlier where I had, apparently, been dismissive of Derek's new business idea. The idea had been a subscription service for personalized vitamins, which already had 6 major players dominating the market. I had asked Derek what his differentiation strategy was. Derek had not known what that meant. My father said my tone had been condescending. 3 weeks later, my mother stopped returning my calls. Derek posted a family photo on his Instagram that I was not in and tagged both of my parents. The caption said something about the people who show up. I was in the middle of a fundraising round. I had not slept a full night in 6 weeks. I sat in my apartment after seeing that post, and I let myself feel it. The particular, specific pain of being excised from your own family, not because you did something terrible, but because you refused to shrink. And then I went back to work, because the alternative was to stop, and I had never been able to stop. I closed that round at $4.2 million. My lead investor was a firm out of Atlanta called Hargrove Capital. The managing partner was a woman named Susan Hargrove, who had built and exited 2 companies before she was 40, and who told me during our second meeting that Meridian was the first investment she had made in 2 years that she was genuinely excited about. I did not tell my parents. There was no one to tell. The silence lasted 22 months. In that time I hired 14 new people, moved into actual office space, and signed the hospital network contract that changed everything. The contract was with Northbrook Health, a network operating in 8 states. The deal was structured over 3 years with expansion options. My legal team spent 11 weeks negotiating it. The day we signed, I took my core team out to dinner at the nicest restaurant I had ever been to in my life. And I sat at the head of the table and thought about how far I was from that spare bedroom. My father called on a Tuesday morning in October. I almost didn't pick up. I was between meetings and I saw his name on my screen. And I stood in the hallway outside my office and stared at it for 3 full rings before I answered. He said he had been thinking about things. He said the family had been going through some changes. He said he thought it might be time to reconnect. I said I was open to that. I meant it. Whatever my parents had done, they were still my parents. And I had spent 22 months telling myself I was fine when I was not entirely fine. I asked how everyone was doing. He said Derek had been going through a difficult stretch. I asked what kind of difficult. He said Derek had left his most recent position. This was at a logistics company where he had been a regional account manager and was taking some time to think about his next move. He said Derek had a lot of ideas. I said that was good. I said I hoped he found something that worked for him. There was a pause. And then my father said that actually, one of the things he had wanted to talk to me about was whether there might be an opportunity for Derek at Meridian. I asked him what kind of opportunity. He said Derek had been doing a lot of reading about the healthcare technology space. He said Derek thought it was a very exciting area. He said he thought Derek could bring a perspective that would be valuable, someone with a strong sales background and good instincts for people. He said maybe we could start with something senior, something that would let Derek hit the ground running. He suggested the title of Chief Revenue Officer. I sat down on the bench in the hallway. Someone walked past me and I waved them on without looking up. I asked my father whether Derek knew what our revenue model was. My father said that Derek was a quick learner. I asked whether Derek had any experience in healthcare software sales, any familiarity with hospital procurement cycles, any understanding of how long our average sales process ran and why. My father said that Derek had instincts and that instincts could translate across industries. I said I would think about it. I did not think about it. What I did instead was call Susan Hargrove and tell her what had happened. Susan listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "How long were they out of your life?" I said, "Almost 2 years." She said, "And now they want a C-suite title for the guy who couldn't hold a job for a year." I said that was a fair summary. She said, "Claire, you know what this is." I said I did. She said, "What are you going to do?" I said I wasn't sure yet. She said, "Whatever you decide, just decide it clearly." I thought about it for 2 weeks. I went back and forth in ways I'm not proud of. There is a version of me that wanted to believe the call was genuinely about reconnecting, that the Derek piece was secondary, that my father just thought he was solving 2 problems at once. I talked myself in and out of that version several times. In the end, I called my father back and told him I couldn't offer Derek a senior executive role. I explained that our CRO position required specific experience I wasn't able to substitute. I said that if Derek wanted to come in for an entry-level sales development role and work his way up, I would be open to that conversation, but I couldn't offer a title that would put him in charge of a team of people who had earned their positions. My father said he thought I was being rigid. I said I thought I was running a company. He said that family should mean something. I said I agreed, and that I had spent the last 22 months thinking about what it meant to me. He said I sounded bitter. I said I wasn't bitter. I said I wasn't bitter. I was clear. He hung up. 48 hours later, Derek called me directly. He was more direct than my father had been, which I'll give him credit for. He said he thought the CRO conversation had been miscommunicated, that he wasn't trying to just walk in and take over, that he respected what I had built. He said he thought he and I had always actually been more similar than different, that we were both entrepreneurial, that we both had a drive to build things. I listened to all of it, and then I asked him what Meridian's gross margin was. He said he didn't have that number in front of him. I asked him what our average contract value was. He said he would need to look into that. I asked him to describe our core product to me as if he were explaining it to a hospital CFO. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said something vague about efficiency and digital transformation that could have described any software company in the country. I said, "Derek, I need someone in that seat who can walk into a meeting with a CFO at a major hospital network and close a 7-figure contract." I said that person needs to know our product, our market, our competition, and our customers' problems better than our customers know them themselves. I said, "I'm not telling you you're not capable of learning those things. But you haven't learned them yet, and I can't build that role around where you are right now. He said he thought I was making this personal. I said the opposite was true. I said if he were anyone else, this conversation would have ended after the first call. He said fine and hung up. The next thing that happened was my mother called. My mother has a particular gift for making you feel as though any position you hold that she disagrees with is a moral failing. She doesn't argue in straight lines. She approaches disagreements the way water approaches an obstacle, finding the edges, the soft spots, the places where your certainty is weakest. She said she was worried about me. She said she could hear in my voice that I was stressed and isolated, that I was surrounding myself with employees and investors, but not with people who truly loved me. She said that Derek, for all his struggles, had a good heart, that he just needed a chance, that he had always looked up to me more than I knew, that saying no to him was saying no to the family, and that she hoped I understood what I was choosing. I said I understood completely. She said she hoped I wouldn't regret it. I said I hoped so too. And then, nothing happened for 3 weeks. And I made the mistake of thinking it was over. It started with a message to one of my board members. His name is Thomas, and he is a careful, deliberate person who does not rattle easily, which is why I knew something was genuinely wrong when he called me at 8 in the morning to tell me he had received an email. The email is from an address I didn't recognize, but the content was specific enough to have come from someone who knew things about my company. It said that Meridian had inflated the metrics in our Series A materials, that our reported customer retention numbers did not match our actual churn rate, and that there were questions about how the Northbrook contract had been secured. All of it was false. Every single sentence. But it was specific enough that a person who didn't know our numbers intimately might wonder. Over the following 4 days, 2 more board members received similar messages. A reporter at a healthcare tech publication reached out to my communications lead asking about our retention metrics. 3 of my sales team members told me they had received LinkedIn messages from an unknown account, asking if they were happy at Meridian, and whether they were aware of certain concerns. I called Susan. She had already heard. She said, "This is coordinated." I said I knew. She said, "Do you know where it's coming from?" I said I had a strong suspicion, but I needed to be sure before I said anything out loud. I called my head of security, a former federal contractor named Marcus, who I had hired 6 months earlier, because Susan told me that at our stage, a data breach would end us faster than any competitor. I told him what was happening and asked him to start tracing. He said, "Give me 72 hours. In the meantime, I did 3 things. First, I prepared a full transparency document for my board, actual retention numbers, actual Northbrook contract documentation, actual Series A metrics with the original source data, and sent it with a cover note explaining that I was aware of a disinformation effort and wanted them to have the facts directly from me before anything else reached them. Second, I called our legal team and told them to start building a file. Third, I went to work every day and I did not say a word about any of it to anyone outside that circle. Marcus came back in 60 hours, not 72. He had traced the email accounts to a creation pattern that pointed to a small PR and communications consultancy operating out of Nashville. The consultancy's client list was not public, but the name of the person who had registered the original email domain was not well hidden. It was a name I recognized. Derek had been dating a woman named Priya for almost 3 years. Priya ran a boutique communications firm that specialized in what she called narrative management. I had met her twice at family events. She was smart, polished, and had looked at me both times with an expression I had chosen not to examine too closely. I sat with that information for one evening. I let myself feel the full weight of what it meant. That my brother had not just pushed back against a professional decision, he had made a deliberate choice to threaten something I had spent years building. He had recruited someone to do it methodically. He had aimed at my board, my press relationships, my team's loyalty, and my biggest contract all at once. And then I stopped feeling it and I started working. My legal team filed a cease and desist. We sent it to Derek directly, to Priya's firm directly, and to the registered address of every shell account Marcus had been able to trace. The letter was specific. It named every message, every recipient, every false claim. It referenced applicable statutes on defamation, notorious interference, and coordinated business disruption. It gave them 72 hours to respond. Derek called me 4 hours after receiving it. His voice was different than it had been in our previous conversations. The ease was gone. He said I was overreacting. I said the letter contained the specific legal citations and I was comfortable with our position. He said he didn't know what I was talking about. I said that was an interesting choice, given that the registered email domain contained his home address. He was quiet. I said I needed him to understand something clearly. I said I had built this company without help from anyone in our family, that I had funded it, staffed it, and grown it. That the people who worked for me had built careers there. That the hospitals we worked with depended on us, and that any action that threatened any of that was something I would respond to with every legal tool available to me. I said I was not angry. I said I was clear. He said this wasn't what it looked like. I said I hoped that was true, because if it was what it looked like, the cease and desist was just the beginning. He said he needed to talk to someone. I said that was probably a good idea. 48 hours later, a response came through both his attorney and Priya's. They agreed to cease all activity, to send retraction communications to everyone who had received the original messages, and to provide written confirmation that Meridian's metrics and contracts were accurate and had not been misrepresented. The retraction came with a legal acknowledgement that the communications had been erroneous. I forwarded the retraction to every board member, to the reporter who had inquired, and to Susan. Susan's response was 2 words: "Good girl." In the weeks after, my father called once. He did not acknowledge anything that had happened. He said he thought the situation had gotten out of hand and that he hoped we could all move forward. He said family was important. I said I agreed that family was important. He asked if we could have dinner sometime. I said I wasn't there yet. He asked what that meant. I said it meant I wasn't there yet. My mother sent me a card in November. A physical card with a stamp mailed to my office address. It said she was proud of me and that she loved me and that she hoped I was taking care of myself. I held it for a long time. I put it in a drawer. I am not interested in performing closure. I don't have. I am not going to tell you I forgave everyone, and that the family healed and that we all sat around a table at Christmas and laughed about how things used to be. That's not the story. The story is that I built something real, that when it was threatened I protected it, and that I learned, clearly and permanently, the difference between the people in my life who want good things for me and the people who want the version of me that's useful to them. Meridian closed its Series B in the spring. $12 million. Hargrove Capital led the round again. Susan and I had dinner the night after the close, just the 2 of us, at a small place she liked in Midtown. She raised her glass and said, "To the people who built it." I said, "To the people who showed up." We drank to that. My team threw a small celebration in the office the following morning. I stood in the middle of that room and looked at every person there. The engineers who had stayed through the hard months. The sales team that had learned to sell a complex product into a complicated market. The operations people who kept everything running while I was putting out fires I couldn't always talk about. And I thought about my father saying that Derek had instincts. Derek has recently started a podcast about entrepreneurship. He has 11 subscribers. I know because my cousin mentioned it at a wedding I attended in September, the first family event I had gone to in over 2 years. It was fine. People were polite. Nobody mentioned any of it directly. I drove home alone that night with the windows down and the radio up, and I thought about the spare bedroom, the 230 hospitals, the $12 million, the team, the contract, the card in the drawer, and the specific, particular feeling of having built something no one can take from you. That feeling doesn't have a name. But I know it when I have it. And I had it all the way home.